You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are just diehard Packers fans, love talking about the Pack. We are not getting into all the national sports media talking points and nonsense that they're wrapping their minds around right now. We are diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and sorting through all the drama and the rumors and the draft extravaganza of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on those socials. And most importantly, jump over to YouTube, search Packers Talk Network, hit that little enter button, hit that subscribe button on the Packers Talk YouTube channel. We would greatly appreciate it. Love y'all subscribers, listeners, y'all hanging out with us every week. We greatly appreciate you. Love hanging out with you as well. We got some fun stuff to cover tonight. We got Isaiah Simmons coming in. All right. Another piece to the puzzle. We got obviously overreactions, underreactions, all the reactions to the draft class. And, we can ponder a few things about what this draft class means. But first, business to take care of course. The show is once again sponsored by Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets as well as Bucks tickets, Brewers tickets, Summerfest tickets, all the tickets to you guys up there in Wisconsin and all around the nation, of course. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. Remember, support those local Wisconsin businesses. And if you're not in Wisconsin, support your local businesses. Tim, good evening, sir. How are we doing?
Good evening. Doing great. Big draft weekend just wrapped up, and it was really fun. We got 8 new prospects and some undrafted guys to talk about, and all these weeks and months that we spent talking about the draft, breaking it down, we finally got to see the Packers put their plan in action and come away with some new players.
Absolutely. We already got a couple friends in the chat here. Chris, the casual in. What up, fellas? GPG, go Pack, go. Good to see you, Chris. Glad you're with us this evening, sir. And then we got Michael Redden, also with a hello and a go Pack, go. A lot of people excited, I think, after this draft class. The overall Packers fan morale seems up. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with how great the draft was in Green Bay. Like, it was awesome. Everything looked perfect the way it played out, and being able to make that first pick, it was a receiver finally, and
what
he was
a moment
there
for Mark Murphy too.
Yeah, Mark Murphy coming out, announcing the pick. They gave him a receiver to announce, so he gets the huge ovation. Matthew Golden's there, so that, I mean, just the first night was incredible, and then just Green Bay looked great. Like, shout out to Mark Murphy, shout out to the Packers, the NFL. Like, they did an awesome job. The amount of people that were there all weekend, they said 600,000. That's great if that was truly 600,000 people or not. But, I mean, it looked incredible. And, the people were there all weekend, and the energy was great all 3 days. You don't always see that with the draft, kind of as Friday and Saturday go along, you see, less excitement in the crowd, but it was there all weekend, and Green Bay did a great job for all the people who, when they were trying to get this thing in Green Bay, and then after it got awarded to them, everybody questioning, could they hold up? Could they do this in Green Bay? Could they pull it off? And they did a spectacular job. It was awesome to see. And then to me, the best story for the Packers was Saturday, the 4th round pick, Sorrell being there. He had his long wait, being in the green room Friday and Saturday. Nobody knew he was there. And then he gets his moment. He wanted to stick around and come out on stage and get his moment with the commissioner. That was awesome. Just incredible. And
that I feel like that caught everybody off guard a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. And this is going to sound silly, but I was seeing the highlights of him doing the selfie thing with everybody in the back and all that.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear who was taken out. You know, it was one of those where I was like, I need to check back in. And I was still trying to catch up with what was going on. I thought it was Devontae Adams. I was like, what is Devontae Adams doing in Green Bay? Like celebrating the draft. I mean, I know he was there, but he's not anymore.
No.
Like just the angle of it, I guess the hairstyle, it looked like Devontae Adams. Like, what is going on here? And then I finally catch up to what happened. I was like, my goodness, he's been in there the whole time. What a story. You know, the one thing that has gotten my attention about him is this comment, and I don't know if you've heard this yet. I believe Dane Brugler brought this out and had this to say that, you know, he was told that teams, a lot of times in interviews will ask a player, hey, you know, which of your teammates, if you could bring any of them with you, would you bring? And he said almost everybody responded with Sorrell. And so that's where it's like, or Sorrell, however, we'll get it right. But that's pretty meaningful. You know what I mean? Like just for all of your teammates to be saying that about you, you know, it's one thing like the media hypes up certain players and that is going to be what it's going to be. They decide who they're going to hype up. And that's not to say that that's a problem. You know, Mel Kiper may have some issues, but some of them get really excited about measurables. Some of them get really excited about big production. You know, media decides who they're going to hype up for different reasons. But the coaches and the players really know who these guys are, you know, and so while Sorrell may not have been at the top of the media boards and the media conversations, it's clear like he's a guy that every last one of those dudes wants lining up next to him, which is like, I am glad that guy's on our side. That's awesome.
Yeah, and a Texas program that had a lot of the guys drafted this weekend. You know, they get a lot of 5 stars and, you know, highly regarded recruits, but he's their guy. You know, like he's the leader of it. He's the one that they want on their team. So that says a lot. And anybody that didn't see his press conference because he got to go over to Lambeau, did a Lambeau leap. And then he had then he had his press conference. Go and watch that press conference because it was really cool. Very emotional. He talked about the people that came with him and stayed there for those couple of days in the draft where he waited around and what they mean to him. But yeah, I mean, he's already a fan favorite, and I think every Packer fan's going to be rooting hard for him. We would anyway, but just his story and what he went through in Green Bay, waiting around and wanting to just have that opportunity to have his moment on stage like that. It's just it was great.
And it really compounds that it's that you were in the town that drafted you. You know, it's like, all right, you're gonna wait around. Yeah, your name will eventually get called, but you know, if it was like the Bears that picked him, he like waits around to get booed relentlessly. That would really suck. Yeah. You know, you wait around all that time, you're the last guy there, but then you're here, man. Like you get to walk out in front of all the fans immediately. Like Golden was talking about that. What a cool thing that is. Like that, what a story. I mean, this draft class, I don't know, fans are going to fan the way they want to, but for me, I feel like this draft class will have a little bit of an asterisk with it in a good way of like, you hope all of these players will be around as long as they can be just for being associated with the event, you know? But yeah, what a cool thing to have happen. Very storybook-esque. So hopefully there's a really Lombardi-filled ending with this, you know, lots of, not one, not two, not three, you know, but we won't go there. But
we can dream.
We can dream. Maybe 4, 5. I mean, Tom Brady got 7 for crying out loud. Anything can happen. Yeah, so very cool. We are kind of glossing over the first thing we were going to get into, which was Isaiah Simmons. So you got another piece of the puzzle here. Isaiah Simmons today signs a 1-year deal with the Packers. I don't know what the plans are for his position. I think he's still formally listed as a linebacker. But, and, you know, this is one of my points kind of about the general team building philosophy happening right now. He's an elite athlete and he's versatile. And I think those are the requirements for entry here at this point. And you look at the draft class, you see a lot of the same. So I'm very excited. I liked Isaiah Simmons coming out of Clemson. I really thought that he was an interesting prospect and was going to be a problem in the league. He hasn't had the impact that you probably want from an 8th overall pick, which he was. But if you just remove that from the equation, this is a fun signing. This is a fun addition to the defense. Again, elite athlete. Not a bad player. He's been good on special teams as well, which is obviously something the Packers really love. But yeah, this is one that I'm particularly excited about. I think anytime you add an elite athlete to the group, you give yourself an advantage that you can't coach into the equation, right? You can't coach his speed, his burst, his, just the movement on the field. And so if you can do that and then you add good coaching to it, you probably have a recipe for success. So I don't know. Are you as optimistic as I am about this?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's some upside with it. I think mainly he's got to be a really good special teams player. And apparently he was last season with the Giants. He played good special teams for. I think that's his primary number one role. And then anything on defense beyond that, I don't, if there's not injuries, I don't think we'll see him much on defense. I mean, it's possible that he comes in, has a good camp, and maybe Hafley's impressed and comes up with some kind of role for him, some kind of package where they get him on the field for a few snaps a game, whatever that may be. But I think at least initially it's got to be special teams and just being that depth linebacker. They lost Eric Wilson, so like they could use a little more depth there. Gives them a veteran presence, a guy that's been around. So, in case of those injuries that always pop up, you're not like relying on a rookie, or somebody that hasn't played in the league. You got somebody that has done it. And I think he'll primarily be a linebacker. I know he's played other roles like nickel and had some safety snaps earlier in his career, but I think he's primarily a linebacker. And yeah, it's a depth move. It's a special teams move. I think, it's probably heavily influenced by Bisaccia. And that's where he's got to be good. And they always could use improved special teams play. So yeah, he's a guy that I don't necessarily think he's any kind of roster lock or anything like that. He's going to be fighting for his roster spot, but I think he's got a pretty good chance to be, one of their depth guys, taking that spot that Eric Wilson had last season. But yeah, he brings him versatility, and he is a really good athlete. So the potential's there for him to kind of be, a role player for them, which is fine, especially at this point in the off season. They're not looking for him to start or play a big role in the defense. But if he can provide them with really good depth and versatility and be good on special teams, I think, it could work out to be a nice signing for him.
Yeah. I like it just for what you said, depth and veteran depth, This type of player is a player that I was thinking that they would probably get out of the draft, and specifically somebody that I was, I tweeted about it too. Was hoping the Packers would get was Kay Medrano, great athlete, guy who's kind of a hybrid, could be hybrid like linebacker safety type guy, but I believe he got drafted by the Commanders. So good luck to Kay Medrano, good dude. But yeah, this fills that same thing, which is depth at linebacker and probably an immediate contributor at special teams. And with those elite athletic traits, you can be very impactful on special teams very quickly. So yeah, that's certainly not somebody I would want to have to block going downfield full speed. That would not sound like a fun assignment to me.
No.
But yeah, so I like it. And it's a 1-year deal. It's clearly something that's not very high risk for them. I don't know how much it was for. I can't imagine it's much more than the vet minimum. Probably a lot like the McCole Hardman deal, something that, if you don't win in training camp, not a big deal if we cut it. But I hope he has some good impact here. I'm excited about this one again. I like elite athletes being on the field, and I'm excited to see what the Packers can do with this guy, because they've had a history now of revitalizing careers a little bit, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So love it. Love the signing. Do you think, what do you, is that it? Do you think he has a role in the defense? Is it just depth? Like, where do you think he finds his best spot?
I think it's probably depth, as long as everybody in front of him's healthy. I mean, maybe if he comes in and he just, blows the socks off him in training camp, and Halfley really likes him and sees his versatility, his athletic ability, and dreams up some kind of package where they get him on the field, maybe in dime situations, nickel situations, somewhere where they can unleash him a little bit. It's possible they find some kind of role for him, but I think most likely he's a depth guy. He'll be behind Quay Walker, Cooper, McDuffie, and I think he's got, with his athletic ability, he's got the potential to be a very good special teams player. And he played a lot of special team snaps with the Giants last year, so it's not like it's something new to him. He can do it. And I think he was pretty highly graded by PFF or whatever that's worth as a special teams player. So yeah, I think it's special teams, and maybe he's got some kind of role on defense. It's possible, but I think he just, for me, the expectation is hope that he's good depth piece and that he can really be, one of the leaders on special teams.
Okay. I don't know. I start getting the creative juices flowing when you think about the linebacker safety hybrid type guy. And, you start looking at this defense and think about how many guys are kind of floating around, right? Bullard's, he's all over the place. There's talk that he could get some outside corner snaps. I don't know that that's wherever. I'm excited about Bullard, get him on the field. But there's a lot of these guys that are kind of floating around. Even Nixon can float around on these different positions. So I'm excited to see how Halfley can get really creative with these guys, and throw some things out there that maybe we haven't seen before. Some type of, and I don't even want to begin to sound silly about suggestions, but getting as much speed on the field as possible in certain situations, where you have Simmons and Coop and Quay all in the field at the same time. And then you got Bullard, and, just get all of your speed on the field at the same time, like stuff like that. And then you don't know who's covering, who's blitzing, who's doing what. I felt like that was when Capers was at his peak, is when he was doing stuff that you had no idea how to react to it. The psycho package or the freak package or whatever. I think it was a psycho package, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The one down lineman, just creating chaos that the offense doesn't know what to do with. I feel like they have the weapons to do that right now with the different athletes they've got in these groups at this point. So that's what I don't know. I kind of look for him in like certain situational packages. I'd like to see him on the field, for the defense. I mean, I think we agree on the special teams part. But yeah, I'd like to see his speed out there next to Quay and Coop and see how you can, put the offense in a bad position with that kind of speed on the field. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's possible.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's going to be fun to see what Halfley does with these weapons, man. He didn't get the top of the draft, right? The top of the draft went to the offense, but I think he got some sneaky pieces here to work with. And we don't need to be under the illusion that he had a million holes to fill, right? Like, we got a lot of things that are stabilized on that defense that just need time to cook. But, obviously you got Xavier McKinney leading the group. You got plenty of stability at DB, whether Jaire comes back or not. We can just table that conversation. It's still bubbling. But you've got some pretty good stability at linebacker now. Defensive line has plenty of stability. You just need more production out of them, and you add a few pieces to that group, and maybe that gives you what you need to get that production. And I know a lot of people wanted DB earlier in the draft. I personally was fine with how they approached it. I really sincerely believe they approached it from best player available, almost like reluctantly. I don't know that they really wanted to take Savion Williams, but I think they had a higher grade on him than they could pass up at that point. But just, reactions to the draft here. I think it goes without saying that we loved Golden. I love the pick. Even if you weren't hoping for a receiver at that pick, it's hard not to love the player. It's hard not to like what you're hearing about the player from an ability perspective, from an arrow up perspective. He's been improving year over year. A lot of guys have been very complimentary of his ability to go from Houston to Texas and adapt so quickly and become a leader in that group. So I'm very, very excited to see how he, finds his role in this offense, and I think it'll happen quick. And I just look forward to his whole journey. I think that's why we call this one the golden era, the green and golden era. I think it's going to be beautiful. But the rest of these draft picks, so we get Belton. The quick response to him is, oh, he's overdrafted. No, I had a 3rd round grade on him, all of that, whatever. The biggest thing we were told is there's really not a difference between picks, like 20 and 60 kind of. Somewhere in that range, right? I think there's different variations of that kind of sentiment, is that, there's just not a lot of difference between that. So if you're going to sit here and tell me that, your Twitter fingers know better than, these guys that are a full squad of scouts that have been doing this for years and years on end, learning from some of the best in the game, I'm just going to pick them. I'm going to pick in Goot, we trust you. At this point, it's like, I don't care. I don't care if you think Belton was overdrafted. I think it's a good pick. I think it's a good addition to this offensive line. I think it addresses an issue that is probably the bullseye of what has kept the Packers out of the Super Bowl over the last 5 years, which is injuries at the offensive line position at very bad times and not having the depth to survive that. So I think that's a great pick. He's a big guy. They clearly seem happy about him. You go back and look at him, he's a mauler. I don't know why, how you could be upset about getting a guy like that. And their track record with offensive linemen in the draft is pretty stinking good. Not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But for me, the Belton pick in Goot we trust, love it. If that's who you think is the pick there. And we also know that he had some desire to trade back and move around, and he didn't do that. So it's like, cool, love it. I trust that pick, and I think it'll pan out. I don't need to put a whole lot more thought into that. And then we get to Savion Williams, and this is my most. I was the most entertained by this pick, and I'm down here, right? I'm just a few miles away from TCU, not too far. So Savion Williams has been on my radar, and after my enthusiasm, we'll say, for Quentin Johnston, and it just sort of smoldered out and hasn't really gone well, I just didn't allow myself to go down the path with Savion Williams. Just decided he's going to be another disappointing TCU receiver, and we're not going to do this, and Goot's not going to draft him anyway, so it's fine. And, of course, the opposite has happened. So now we have to fall in love with this guy, and it's not hard to do. He's a lot of fun to watch. I love the pick. I love the player. I think certainly there's some things that need to be corrected, and he's not a perfect prospect, as if he was at 6'5", 225 with his athleticism running 4.4, he would have been a first-round pick. But still, the upside and the fact that you don't need him to be anything more than whatever he's going to be at this point. He doesn't need to be receiver 1. He doesn't even need to be receiver 2. He can just be whatever the best fit for him is in this offense, and let it fly. I'm excited to see that version of Savion Williams. He's a beast at his best. When he's got the ball in his hands and he's running, he is. He kind of looks like trying to tackle Predator, man. Like he just looks. Somebody compared him to Marion Barber, who his nickname was Predator, I believe, for a little while, at least in Dallas. But yeah, so he runs angry, and we want some of that. So I like the pick. I'm not going to hyperanalyze who you could have gotten at those places. I'm just. Do you like the pick or not? I like the pick. I think he's got a place in this offense, and we can now put the final nail in this whole coffin of we didn't get him enough weapons. There's enough weapons. We got the weapons. You not one but 2 tight ends, right? You not one but not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. We got like 6 or 7 or 8 receivers. You got a second-round pick running back coming back behind one of the best running backs in the league right now. Your offensive line, which is pretty dang good, just got better. Like, put up or shut up time, guys. But I never will accept any argument of, well, there weren't enough weapons. Not hearing it. And then you get to the rest of the draft. So, the offense there kind of dominated early on, and we're saying that. I'm not disappointed by not getting Hafley some of those picks. And I think, sure, you can hyperanalyze things, and in the future you might have some real objective cases for, hey, you should have taken this guy instead, like the Creed Humphreys thing. But where we sit right now, I love the idea and the philosophy, and maybe this wasn't the way they wanted to go. It truly was just how the board fell to them. But with the way that it played out is, let's not double down, but like quadruple down on this damn offense. Like, Jordan Love's good. We got some good pieces in this offense. Let's not just putter around here. Let's go out here and just flood this thing with competition, and you're going to get the best out of it. Whereas I think, there were a few years there with Aaron Rodgers where you could accuse them of being complacent with building that offense. And I think we were all, as fans, not mad about that because they were trying to build the defense. And, Ted, all the respect, RIP brother. We don't need to go hyperanalyze his career. We got Goot right now. But yeah, I think that they're seeing that. They're seeing that there was maybe some ways to have been better during Rodgers' tenure, which Goot was present for, right? He wasn't GM, but he was there. He saw how it was run. And to go back and say, no, look, we've got a good offense. Let's have a great offense. Let's have the best offense. Let's just keep throwing things until this offense is better than any offense we could possibly build. And I'm totally cool with that because the defense was already pretty dang good last year. You didn't need to plug a bunch of holes. So what do you think, Tim? I've been pretty long-winded on this. I kind of covered our first 3 picks there at the draft. Do you agree, disagree? Am I out of my mind? Where are we at on this?
So I think the first 3 picks, it was surprising that they were all offense. I would have never expected the first 3 picks to be on offense.
Me
but
either,
I think,
to be fair.
I think the way it broke was kind of a combination of they were the top guys on the board, but they were the best options. And I think you got to go back to some of Goody's comments after the first round. They had trade options, but they chose not to take them. They chose Matthew Golden. And I think part of that was a lot of us expected a defensive lineman, whether that being an edge rusher or a tackle. Tackles were going off the board. Kenneth Grant went. Harmon went. Edge rusher Stewart went. Who else am I getting there at? Walter Nolan, who I don't know if they would have taken anyway, but he went earlier than their pick. So they were sitting there with Golden, whatever trade opportunities that they had. And, I think Ian Rappaport had put it out there that the Eagles were trying to move up. They eventually did one spot, but I think they might have been trying to move up to the Packer spot. We know the Giants moved back in. The Falcons moved in and took Pierce, who I don't think the Packers would have ever considered. But it was kind of like, all right, we can take one of these trades. We can take Golden, who they obviously really like. Or if you want to take a defensive lineman, like the next one that went off the board, and all the, the team's boards are different, but the next one off the board was Talik Williams from who the Lions took. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's a first-round player. I like him. I think he's good. He's a big, run stuffer at this point, with a little bit of pass rush, and maybe he develops more, but I don't think they were going to take Talik Williams in the first round. Like, he doesn't give you enough pass rush right now and may never to be a first round guy. I think they took the player that they obviously like a lot, but I think it was the best option for them, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I like Golden a lot. He's got the speed, but I think he's not just a speed guy. Like, he can win at all 3 levels. He can run routes. He's got really good hands, which is nice to see because we know how much our receivers struggled last year with drop passes. And you can move him around. He's going to play inside, but he's going to be mostly an outside receiver as well. But you have versatility with him. And my only concerns with him are his size. He's 5'11", 190. Maybe he gets up a little bit, adds a few pounds, but he's never going to be a big receiver. And I worry a little bit about, like, he didn't really come on strong until the second half towards the end of the season with Texas. So, why did it take that long? Well, he spent his first 3 years at Houston and went to a much different offense at Texas. Houston runs the Mike Leach air raid system. So and Sarkisian at Texas runs a much different system. So maybe it just took him that long a time to like catch up and learn the offense and be comfortable with it. But I like him a lot. And then Belton and Williams, I think before their picks came up, we saw different defensive tackles went early in the second round. There were some guys that went high in the second round that probably, looking at it before the draft with mock drafts, with everybody, the experts rankings were probably late second or third round guys, but they went earlier in the second round. There were a couple cornerbacks that went before the Packers pick. So I don't question that they like Belton. They had him up there for a pre-draft visit. Senior Bowl guy, which we know how much they value that. And I have no problem with taking him there. I know there's people saying, well, you could have got him in the third round. How do you know that?
I hate that statement. You don't know that.
And with an offensive tackle, or even if you project him inside, tackles go quick. So you need to get tackles, right? There's no way of knowing if he's going to be around late third round. Maybe he would have been, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But they liked him enough to take him. I don't have a problem with it. He's a massive guy, and it's a clear shift between him and Banks, who they signed, and even Sean Ryan. They're going for bigger, more physical offensive linemen. Jason Spriggs, who they took in the second round, who was a lighter offensive lineman, they're not living in that world anymore.
No. We're far removed from that now.
Yeah, and it's a philosophical switch. I think that they want to be more of a physical team, not so much an outside zone. We need great linemen that can move and be out in space blocking. And I think part of that, or a lot of that, is how Josh Jacobs runs. They want to clear holes for him. And as great as he was last year, he was getting hit at and behind the line of scrimmage a lot and making yards. They want to make it easier for him.
Part of what made him great. If you were watching, he was getting the heck beat out of him all the time, and he was just springing back up every time.
So let's get these big physical guys that can maul people and get him cleaner looks, get him to the line of scrimmage and through the line of scrimmage a lot easier, right? Belton's massive. He's a big guy.
6'6", 336.
Yes, and long arms, but he's got some feet. He's got some athletic ability as well. And I think they're going to start him off at tackle, as Goody has said and LaFleur said. He may eventually be a guard, and I could definitely see, him being the eventual replacement for Sean Ryan at right guard. Could be, but I think they're right to try him at tackle. Let him try. And if the fit's not there, if he's not good enough, then you kick him inside.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to argue with taking an offensive lineman. You need linemen. You need them obviously to protect the franchise quarterback, open up the holes for Jacobs, but you just need depth. The Packers got incredibly lucky last season. They went in the entire season. One starter missed one game. That was Josh Myers missed the first Lions game. The rest of the way, all their starters played every game.
And then when they got hurt against the Eagles, you saw how that went.
Right.
It was disastrous.
When Jenkins went down, it was a disaster because all of a sudden Kadeem Telford's playing and Travis Glover's playing. One of the storylines in training camp last year that I think a lot of people forget is they didn't have that third tackle behind Rasheed Walker or Zach Tom. That's why Andre Dillard was there. And he didn't have a very good camp or preseason. He kind of was their next tackle just by default. And that's why Telford kind of made the team. And I know Telford's a younger guy and he's developing and maybe he will continue to, but you need depth because you're not going to be that lucky again where, you only have one starter miss one game all season. You're going to need more guys. So I have no problem with taking an offensive lineman and building that depth. And I know a lot of people are now going to be, well, where are you going to play Jordan Morgan? They're figured out. They're going to work out.
And they'll find the right pieces.
Right. And I think a lot of the Belton thing too is it's not even so much about 2025. It's depth through 2025. It's 2026 and down the line because Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, Sean Ryan, their contracts are up. Elton Jenkins is now pushing 30 and he's got a big contract. So they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Jenkins in the future. So now you have Morgan, you have Belton there. You kind of already have some replacements on the offensive line so that you don't have to go scrambling and be desperate next year to replace 2 or 3 of your offensive linemen. You already have their replacements and can be developing them. it's looking ahead and planning ahead, which is smart. And then finally, for the first 3 rounds, Savion Williams, did not expect that.
That was
not,
wild.
that was a wild one, and he's a big guy, very athletic. Played running back, played wildcat quarterback, played receiver, did a lot of things. He's versatile. And there's a lot of Cordero Patterson in his game. I know people are saying Debo. I think it's so hard to like. Debo's the one guy that's done what he's done. Like he's like the unicorn of it, and to go out there and be like, yeah, we're going to draft this guy and he's going to be Debo. Like, I don't know. Maybe.
They're just, I mean, Savion's a different size. He's 6'4", 6'5". Debo's 6 foot.
Yeah, and he's a big physical receiver, but he's a gadget guy, and I think that's how he's going to have to start because he is very raw as a receiver. Mm-hmm. He's got questionable hands. There's a lot of drop passes, right?
Yeah,
and they didn't
8 drops last season.
Yeah, and he wasn't a high volume catcher, and a lot of the passes they were throwing were bubble screens or something real quick to just get the ball in his hands and get him in space because he's so good, running dudes over and doing things after the catch. So he's got a long way to go as a route runner and developing as a receiver. So I would expect they're going to try to do, I don't think wildcat, but you may see him get some jet sweeps. You may see him at times in the backfield. They're going to probably try to move him around, but I hope that they don't lose sight of developing him as a wide receiver because that's I think that's the biggest upside for him is if he can develop that part of his game and be a better route runner and learn how to be a complete receiver because then he's got a lot more potential. I think if you keep him in this gadget role, I don't know. It could work out where he's a big part of the offense, but it's more risky. But I think he's got a long way to go to really develop. To me, it's a boom or bust pick. And I see what they're thinking. I see what they see in him. Obviously, he's a freak athlete and he's got great size. And when he gets the ball in his hands and he gets going, it's fun. But there's a lot of development that he needs down the line. So the first 3 picks, that's the one where I kind of go, I don't know about that one. It takes I don't know, but I get where they're going. And I think it also sends a message between Golden and Williams, 2 of your first 3 picks are at receiver. Like those receivers are on notice, like the urgency comment from Goody at his end of season press conference that keeps getting brought up might be directed a lot towards them. Like they're telling you they're not happy with what those guys did last season between the drop passes and the lack of development, lack of consistency. Like they're on notice. And obviously there's contract situations coming up as well and an injury to Watson. But yeah, they're not going to allow those guys to just have another year to develop. Like it's kind of now or never for a few of them.
No, it's definitely put up or shut up time.
Yeah. And I like that. I think it's refreshing that they're not just going to say, well, they'll be better this year. They're young and they're still learning and developing. And we still believe in them. Like, yeah, you can still believe in them, but give them a kick in the ass. And I think this is the kick in the ass that they need. So yeah. I like that part of it. To me, this team, and it's almost, I don't know if I want to get into this part of it yet. They need pass rush. Like we've been saying that since last season. It was the biggest need coming into this offseason. And they haven't addressed it until the 4th round of the draft. That's not good enough. Like
maybe,
but
maybe that's not good enough. We don't know.
A lot of this is now up to the new defensive line coach and developing Lucas Van Ness and Brenton Cox and Devontae Wyatt. And okay, like I hope they all develop and they're all great, but I think they need it more. And I like Sorrell. I think it's beyond just like the cool story of him being there and his press conference and all that. The dude's got talent. Like he could really help this team. I think at least he's a nice depth rotational piece that like lifts the floor. Like he's better than Aaron Mosby, like
yes.
He'll push Brenton Cox. But I think he's got upside to be, a solid football player, maybe a solid starter, if not like, a solid rotational piece, your number 3, your number 4 defensive end.
He's a strong athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a 256-pound dude that jumps 34 inches on his verticals, got a 4.6 40. I mean, this dude's moving.
And they were using him like they would kick him inside to tackle at Texas. And he's not going to do that in the NFL.
But the ability to go fight with the big boys inside is a good one to have.
Yeah, but I'm almost thinking like maybe that hurt his development. Like maybe if he was on the edge more and learning that position more, it might have helped his development, helped his production. Who knows? But yeah, I like that pick. I think it's a real solid pick. If you would have said to me before the draft, like, hey, their first 3 picks, none of them are on defense, I would be shocked that they didn't go tackle and or pass rusher, at least one of them at those positions, if not 2. But I do like the Sorrell, like just looking at the draft and not, big picture yet. I like the Sorrell pick. And we can get in. I don't know if you want to jump in or not, but we can get into the rest of the day 3 guys, because I think there's some interesting picks there as well.
Well, yeah. Let's keep going with them, because I think we have to. It's easy to get sucked into the number of the pick, right? How high was the pick, and who are these guys, and what do we know about them? And I think that the way the Packers look at this is a lot more kind of level, right? They don't look at it necessarily as like, well, we got this first round pick, but then we didn't get a D tackle till the 6th round, so we didn't really upgrade the D tackle room. Or in kind of the same sentiment with edge there, right? It's like, well, we spent the 4th round pick, and Oliver, whether he's an edge or not, 5th round pick, maybe he's an edge. We're hearing he's going to be off ball, whatever. It's later, it's day 3, right? You're addressing it on day 3, which, and Packers fans have been consistent about this with the receiver thing. It's like, even when you're hitting on guys like Romeo Doubs in the 4th round, Packers fans aren't happy if you're not spending that 1st round asset where they want it, right? Which receiver, we finally got one. But I think they've hit enough in the later rounds, especially the day 3 picks, where it's like, you got to look at this like, Sorrell might have an impact, man. Like, if his teammates at Texas loved him that much, his addition with chemistry into that locker room really might be meaningful. We don't know those things. We can't project them. You can't rule them out.
No, and we saw last year that, once they moved on from Preston Smith, eventually Brenton Cox jumped ahead of Van Ness. So, yeah, they want Van Ness to progress and get better, and he's a huge part of their pass rush, they hope, next year, of unlocking it and getting it better. But if he's not doing that, they've shown just by playing Brenton Cox more snaps that they'll put some other guy on the field, somebody else on the field, and it could be Sorrell.
Yeah. And that's where I say, like, let's see how this plays out, because they did address these things. They didn't do it the way we wanted them to, and that's fine. We're accustomed to that. But at the same time, they have hit in these places where you have to sort of hold off on judgment. It's like, yeah, this guy might, though. And the other part of this is the next one. Well, and I don't want to gloss over Colin Oliver. Colin Oliver is your 5th round pick. Interesting one here. He also, I believe, is an elite athlete, isn't he?
Yeah, really good athlete, and a much different pass rusher than anyone they've had in a while, because he's undersized. He's like 6'1", 240.
Right.
And he's going to be, and they've kind of said, like, he's going to be a designated pass rusher who maybe eventually at some, play some Sam linebacker for him a little bit, but he's mainly going to be on the field to rush the passer. And they don't do that. They don't draft those kind of guys. And I mean, he's got some really cool film too.
He does. Yeah. His film's fun.
Off the edge. Right. But at his size, he's not going to be out there holding up against the run. Like he's going to get demolished. And, I worry if he's not winning with speed, and he probably won't against, once we get into the regular season, if he's on the field, it's going to be tough for him to win. But I think when you see him in camp, when you see him in the preseason, and he's going up against, some third string right tackle in a preseason game, he'll be flying off the edge, lighting that guy up.
Yeah.
But I think he's a designated pass rusher until he kind of maybe can find, he's not going to get much bigger, but maybe there's a role for him. Maybe there's a Sam linebacker / pass rusher, some kind of hybrid role for him down the line. But they obviously like his tools and his athletic ability and his rush potential.
And this is where I get excited for what Halfley can do, right? You're given a handful of weapons here, and this can apply to the receiver core as well. None of them have to be the weapon, right? Xavier McKinney is pretty much your captain, right? Kind of the leader of the defense, I would say, is fair to sort of put that out there. But like with an Oliver, he's a great athlete. 4.5 speed is legit at 240. That's flying, man, and that's a 240. It's a missile. So you got this guy who can fly around. He can beat up tackles. You can keep him fresh, and you can use him in ways that the offense doesn't know how to respond to. And it doesn't have to be, 30 plays a game or whatever it is. Maybe it's, just a handful of plays, like 15 plays a game, something like that. Chris, the casual in over here in the comments, he's right along there with me on this. Don't forget about that 5th round speed rusher. He might play 10 plays a game and make an impact. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, you use him very, very specifically in a way that's not really on film, and the offense doesn't know how to respond to it. And when you got him, you got Simmons, you got Bullard, you got all these guys that just sort of float around. That they could be here, they could be there. Even Sorrell being able to flex into the tackle position if you want him to, or go out. Halfley, I think, he gives me excitement about this in a way that the last guy who shall not be named didn't, right? Because with Barry, we all knew that creativity was not part of the equation. That was the frustration, really. That's what the crux of it came down to. But so having these weapons, which he did have some weapons, you're like, all right, well, I hope this works. But you didn't really get to think about, man, how is he going to do this? And how is he going to use these guys? You get these guys on the field at the same time. Whereas Halfley started showing us last season that he could do some of that. He could take pieces and use them strategically and creatively. Now he's getting a lot more pieces, and they may not be the shiniest, the 1st and the 2nd round pick pieces, but he's got some elite athletes, and Isaiah Simmons being part of that too. And the other winner is Bisaccia here. Special teams just got upgraded, I'd say, quite a bit.
You hope so. Yeah.
So I am not underwhelmed by this. I did say that I was as they were happening. These were kind of underwhelming picks to me at the time, but the more I looked into them, more I was not mad about them by any means. And let me continue on real quick with the point. Round 6, we go off and we get Warren Brinson. Now, he's not the shiniest of the D linemen to come out of Georgia, but still a massive human coming out of Georgia.
Sure.
And I've brought this point up a few times on the pod, but the Eagles being as good as they were wasn't because Cooper DeJean is just a beast, or because, insert player is just a beast. You had a massive mountain in the middle of your D line. And from there out, that had a ripple effect. And, oh, by the way, you had good players at each of those levels, right? We're not downplaying that any of those players are bad players, and it's a lot like what the Packers defense in 2010 looked like. All of those levels were complementing each other. You kind of heard it in the famous Matthews highlight from the Super Bowl. Spill it, Pickett. He's working with his defensive tackle. He understands what's coming, knows how to work with him. And those two are feeding off of each other, and boom, it causes a game-changing play. Things like that cannot be overlooked or overstated. If you don't have that mountain in the middle to start with, the rest of it, the responsibilities kind of start to spill over. So getting Warren Brinson, you replace TJ Slayton essentially. Another dog, so you get to put him next to some former teammates. But what I was asking for before the draft is a monster in the middle. And so I feel like they addressed that here. You know, you get Brinson. I'm trying to pull up his height weight. He's not the monster. He's 6'4", 310.
6'5".
Or
Actually,
what do you
he's
got?
6'5", 315.
Okay, it's a little bit more than that.
He's a big
ESPN has
dude.
6'4", 310. He's a big
So
dude, and I would venture to guess that he could probably add a few pounds onto that frame. So, you know, maybe he doesn't stay at 315, but he's a big dude. And you get him in there, you get your new D-line coach in there, which the whole crew seems to be willing to put a lot of pressure on this D-line coach, which I'm totally cool with. But there's a strong assumption that you've got talent in the room, and the talent has not been put in the best situation to succeed. So that's where it's like, all right, these are not the shiniest of pieces, but they are pieces. And if you've already got pretty good guys in the room and faith in your coaches that you've got guiding these guys, you don't need the first round pick, right? You should be able to get what you need out of a fifth, sixth, seventh round pick at this point. Maybe even an undrafted free agent. Chris, dude, you're getting ahead of me, man, on all this stuff. He's pointing out Nazir Stackhouse, the other one out of Georgia.
yeah,
And shout out, Chris, man, you're on it tonight. So my point is the Eagles have set this tone, right? You have to have a mountain in the middle. And they've got a really good mountain. It's not just any mountain. Theirs is really good. And the players around them are very good. But when all those pieces start complementing each other, they're even better. So I think what the Packers have seen there is like, yes, you need that there. And I think they believe that the pieces around the mountain that they've got with these two Georgia D tackles, because Nazir Stackhouse, he's also what measures?
He's big. He's at almost 330, and he deserves mention because he's a nose tackle, which they don't really have right now other than Kenny Clark.
Right.
So the fact, I mean, he's undrafted, so you don't know if he even makes the team, but he gives them another guy that can play nose straight up. Like he's a pure nose tackle. Whereas Brinson, maybe he can play that. He's kind of more, less of a nose.
He's
know?
He's got a longer build where Stackhouse is more, he is a stacked house.
Yes.
And I can say that. I stood next to him and interviewed him for about 5-10 minutes at the Shrine Bowl. Big dude. Neat dude. Really enjoy him. I do believe he'll fit very well in Green Bay. He's a Green Bay kind of guy.
And they both have a lot of experience playing on a really good defense for what that's worth. But just, the measurables, the size, it gives them depth. And to me, like, I'm fine with the Brinson pick. And I like Stackhouse. I really want to see what he can do at nose tackle because he might be a sneaky, undrafted guy that makes the team for him just because they don't have that kind of player, right? Like
he'd be the one I'd put my money on in this group. And there's some good names in this undrafted
They
group.
signed a couple guys that are interesting. But anyway, so like I like the Brinson move and you hope that he's TJ Slayton. Like if you can get that at him, that's really good. Right. I think he's a little bit different of a player, but like
yes.
At least initially, like come in there and like focus on stuffing the run because that's what they could use, right? With losing Slayton. And he provides you depth and another big guy inside. So yeah, I like the Brinson move for a 6th round pick. I'm cool with that. If he can be somewhat close to what TJ Slayton was, it's a good move. And Stackhouse on top of it. And I just want to talk about Oliver earlier, and it made me think like between Oliver and Isaiah Simmons, it's almost like halfway's got these like gadget kind of toys, like Savion Williams is for LaFleur on offense. Like they gave him these versatile, unique guys to kind of like, hey, figure out how you want to use them, but you got some athletes here that have some versatility, and it's a new toy to play with,
Well, maybe we need to start looking at things a little bit differently. Like, we adopted the philosophy at running back pretty quickly of running back by committee, and the Giants with, what was that back in the day? They had the 3 of them. They had, what was it? Brandon Jacobs,
Bradshaw, Ahmad Bradshaw,
and who was the other one?
I can't remember the other one.
The third one, but
like their third down back.
They were a 3-headed monster, and they were all a little bit different in skill set. And I think that there's definitely a lot of benefit to approaching these positions that way, especially to the players, right? Like if you're a Savion Williams and guys are looking at you. You know, you got again the 6'5", 225 frame. Like you look like you should be almost in that Calvin Johnson type category of receiver. But as we've talked about, he's raw as a receiver. He's a ball carrier, right? We could just call him that. Call him a ball carrier. You want him to turn into a receiver, right? You want to polish him into a receiver. You want to give him the footwork, the route running, all that. But when he doesn't have to be that dude, that when you don't need him in your offense to rise to receiver one in year one or year two, I think you have a better shot at getting the best out of him when he can just be who he is in your offense, right? So like in your offense, again, in the Packers, the way we're looking at it, the way you just described, you know, these defensive pieces on the offensive side of the ball, you know, you've got Jaden Reed being what he is, and Savion Williams is probably similar in what they'll be asked to do and what they're good at, but they're going to be able to be good at it in different ways because Jaden Reed's 5'11", Savion Williams is 6'5". There's very different matchups, you know. So there's ways to take advantage of those things against the defense and really be able to just like kind of shoot with a sniper rifle a little bit instead of forcing these guys to be in there for snaps that maybe you could have a better skill set in those snaps. You know, and a Matthew Golden is a completely different skill set than a Savion Williams.
Right.
I would compare it to the difference between a Christian Watson and a Romeo Doubs, although not the same. It's just probably the same gap. Because those four players are all different. There's not a good like matchup of any of them. They're all very different. But you have a lot of these bodies now. So again, you're not asking a Jaden Reed to be your receiver one just because he's probably your most skilled receiver on the offense anymore. You know, where there was a time that you were doing that. I remember there was a time where Bears fans were, who was their receiver? And he's just recently was it Mooney? They were thinking Darnell Mooney was their receiver one. It's like there's not a world where Darnell Mooney's a receiver one. It's just that's not his skill set. You plug him in, you let him be like a really good receiver two, receiver three, you're going to get the most out of him. He's not receiver one. And you could say that for a lot of these situations around the league where you just need guys to be the third best receiver because they are the third best receiver. Now, what the Packers are going into right now, and I think what they've been sort of setting people up for and resisting this receiver one conversation is they're just like, look, we got a lot of weapons here. We can just use whatever weapon we need to when we need to, you know, like this one's big and fast. We'll use him in certain situations. This one's faster, but small. We're going to use him in different situations, you know, and this one's a better blocker, you know, like that's the way they'll deploy these guys. And it won't be really a thought of like receiver one, receiver two, receiver three. It'll just be who matches up the best against this current defense, which that's what you want. I think when you just got this plethora of chess pieces at your disposal to use in the best way possible, that's when you're putting your coaches in the best decision or best situation to coach at their best, you know, to call the game at their best, you know. So real long-winded there to kind of throw some comps out of like how the Packers are doing these things right now. I really believe they're kind of taking a new age philosophy. I don't know that what they're doing necessarily has a comp across the league yet. I would say the Eagles are definitely doing it in certain ways, right? They definitely went out and stacked their receiver core. They went out and stacked their defense, and they've got these different weapons that they can just deploy as it makes sense. So other than that, you're not really seeing that across the league. But anyway, I didn't want to get too hung up before we finish through. We're getting towards the end of the pod here. We got a couple more picks to mention and talk about. But yeah, you know, the biggest concern to sort of wrap up that thought in a bow that we went down the rabbit hole of is the pass rush, right? We wanted to upgrade the pass rush going into this draft. You're not so sure that they did. I feel good that they did indirectly, right? You add depth pieces, you lift your floor, you also improve your D-line, and you get that ripple effect. And I think that they're counting on that, especially with the improvement in coaching. So we finally get a DB again in the 7th round, Micah Robinson. And in any other team, this is probably just sort of like a roll your eyes pick. But we've got Carrington Valentine to prove like, hey, maybe you should pay attention here. This guy actually might be a baller. So what do you think about Micah Robinson? He was in for a 30 visit. You know, they clearly liked him. This wasn't just sort of a firing from the hip kind of pick here. You think this guy comes in and competes?
I definitely think he competes, and I think there's room for him to make the team. Absolutely, just because they lack depth at cornerback. That after the top three guys, Nixon, Hobbs, Valentine, it drops off, and that's one of those are your top three cornerbacks.
I don't think
the other one's on the team. As the GM said, he's on the roster right now, and that's all he would say. So those are the top three cornerbacks, and those will be the top three cornerbacks going into training camp, unless they acquire someone else. They need depth. Like, you lost Ballantyne, you lost Rochelle, you lost Stokes, and we can say like, yeah, those guys, But I think Ballantyne and Stokes at least played that depth special teams role for you. They didn't replace him. Hobbs is here, but they're going to be down four corners, and they're only bringing one in. So now you add Robinson to the mix, so he can compete. He can compete with Kalen King, who was on the practice squad last year, Kamal Hayden, who was on the practice squad and actually got called up from the practice squad a few times. It's one of those positions, and I don't think there's very many right now, but and this is kind of a bigger picture thing too, but if there's a guy to add between now and camp, they could add a depth cornerback, a veteran off the street, kind of in that Ballantyne role, like play special teams. And if you're called upon, go in there and, at least get us by and play some solid cornerback for us. Because there's not many guys there. But yeah, I think going back to your question, I think he can come in and compete. He is a little lighter, but he plays probably bigger than his size. He's feistier. He's mostly going to be an outside corner. I don't think they kick him inside. I think they have enough guys that can come in and play slot, so they need him to win and be a good corner outside. And you never know. Like, obviously, you mentioned Valentine. It worked out for him in the 7th round. They took King last year. It didn't work out so much for him, but he did last all season on the practice squad and will have a chance again this year to make the roster. So it's worth a shot. And that was one of the surprises, too, was them not taking a cornerback earlier. But as you and I have talked about in the weeks leading up to the draft, it was a weird class of corners. There are a lot of guys that were coming off injuries, and then just some guys that either didn't test well or just they weren't big enough for what the Packers like. So it just, and I know Will Johnson, a lot of people had him going to the Packers in mock drafts in the 1st round. They passed on him, as did everybody else, and he got picked in the 2nd round because apparently he's got a knee issue that is pretty concerning. The report is that he might not make it to a second contract. So
yeah,
if the Packers feel that way, there was no way they were taking him. So forget about him. And I know the other one was Maxwell Hairston, who a lot of people, again, a lot of national big names had mocked to the Packers. But he's a little lighter too, a little undersized, and he's not a good tackler. And I didn't really see it. I'm like, I don't think they'd like him, but I kind of bought into it's a possibility, but it would have been a weird fit to me. And obviously they chose to pass on him and go with Golden in the 1st round. I think that's the right move anyhow. But
well, and let's just take a look at one of their undrafted free agents to sort of get a glimpse into, how they might value size.
Bugs.
Did you see how big Bugs is?
Yeah, he's like 224 or something for a corner.
He's a freaking linebacker playing corner, man.
Yeah,
he is a linebacker, and he's a corner. He's listed as a corner, not a safety.
I guess,
not a DB. He's a corner. So when you're like, well, he might be kind of undersized. I'm like, yeah, the undrafted free agent cornerback they signed is like 6'3", 230.
Yeah.
I think they value size.
I guess so. But yeah, I couldn't believe that. I'm like, is that a misprint? But then I saw multiple people.
He's
I'm like,
massive,
wow, really?
man.
Yeah, that's really his size. So yeah, Robinson, I think if he comes in, he's really good on special teams. And if you go back a couple of years to Valentine when he was in camp, he just was like, every time he was out there, he produced. He was in your face. He was aggressive.
Absolutely.
He wasn't scared of taking on, the first team offense. Like, he didn't back down, and he made the most of his opportunity. So if Robinson can do that, yeah, certainly he can make the roster. And then the last pick of the draft was John Williams, the offensive tackle from Cincinnati. He's likely going to go inside the guard. got pretty good size. Played a lot of snaps there at Cincinnati. Was a starter. You got to trust the Packers and how they develop offensive linemen. I think, it's going to be tough for him to make the roster. And if he makes it, he's going to have to be that number 9, number 10 offensive lineman because they have added other guys and they have some competition there for the last few spots. So he'll be competing with Telford and Glover and Jacob Monk to make, that last 1 or 2 spot at offensive line. But if not, probably a practice squad guy at least, and he's developmental lineman, and that's fine. Take a shot on him and see what he can do. And he's got
Rasheed Walker.
Right, Rasheed Walker was a 7th round guy, and they're not all going to be Rasheed Walker, but if he turns out to be, like a nice versatile backup offensive lineman for a 7th round pick, that's great, But it's going to be tough for Williams at least to make the initial roster just because they have more guys there, and
yeah.
But who knows? He comes in and he makes that move in the guard and looks like a natural at it. Then I think they find a spot for him. Otherwise, I think he's a practice squad candidate, which is fine.
Yeah. And he was also a Shrine Bowl guy, not a guy that I got a chance to talk to. But yeah, you can't ignore these picks anymore, man. Like after he's hitting on guys in the 7th round, it's like, all right, well, we got to pay attention. They're very, very intentional with these picks all the way through. So I'm looking forward to see what they, could mean and how these guys could have an impact. Micah Robinson's an interesting one, but yeah. So overall, I'm very, very excited about the draft class. Did they do enough in the draft? I say yes. Yes, they did. I'm not a believer that you have to solve your problems in the first 2 rounds of the draft. I like the solutions that they went with at edge. The 2 guys we talked about in the 4th and 5th rounds. I love bringing in Brinson and Stackhouse as an undrafted free agent. But I think those 2 both find their way on this roster. And, we'll get into that later on. We'll go probably like we did last year, position group by position group and take a closer look at how we think they might shape up. But I think they addressed some of their biggest problems on defense. And I think that they gave the offense a massive shot in the arm. And because the offense was good, right? There's nobody sitting here saying, well, the Packers offense is just terrible. But when you take, guys like Matthew Golden, Belton, and then Savion Williams, that's just, you talk about lifting your floor. You just jacked your floor up, man. Your floor just went way up. So I love it. I thought that they did a great job in this draft, addressing all their different holes across the board, lifting the floor, adding to depth, increasing competition, giving themselves more tools to work with, or their coaches more tools to work with. What do you think, man? Did they do enough?
Well, I think overall in the offseason, we can talk about that another time. But as far as the draft goes, I think they added versatility. I think they gave themselves, at least offensively, I think they're in a better spot overall because you gave a kick in the ass to the receivers that you already have. So they better develop because there's already guys here that are going to replace them. And they're making it clear they're going to continue to give Jordan Love weapons and they're going to continue to add offensive linemen to keep him protected. And I think that's obviously huge and critical. So I think it's a shot in the arm for the receivers, a shot in the arm for the offense overall. And I also think a lot of this draft is, I think this draft is more about 2026 than it is about 2025. And
I agree.
Sometimes that's tough to take because we all want to see instant impact and like, how can we help the roster today? But like the draft is not just about today, it's about future years down the line. And they got a lot of decisions coming up on guys who are coming in the contract years. And so now you're already bringing in some replacements for those guys, right? Like that's clear. Offensive line, receiver, like there's guys waiting there to take some spots that you can't keep everybody. You can't sign everybody to big.
Never could. That was always the case.
Right. So now you're already planning ahead for that and you're building your depth for 2025. So there's a lot of, I like a lot of what they did. Yeah, there's some things I definitely question and can nitpick and have concerns about, but it's an interesting class. There's some fun new weapons on both sides of the ball, really. And, even defensively where I have concerns about the pass rush, I think at least they raised the floor there and they created deeper room at edge rusher and really at tackle too with Brinson and Stackhouse. So yeah, I'm satisfied with it. And obviously, this is just the start of it. And yeah, we'll see how that all plays out throughout 2025. And, I hate grading drafts. I don't believe in that. So
you can't do that until you're about 4 years down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. Like, I'll give you a grade in 3 or 4 years from now. Yeah. But I get where they were coming from and what they were seeing and what they were trying to do in this draft. It makes sense.
Yeah, I can't say that there's anything that disappoints me about this draft. If you're a fan who sits there and you're just like hoping with all of your might for, them to draft for need at this specific, it's just not going to happen. Like, you got to readjust your expectations. They've proven year in and year out that they're just not going to draft for need. Sometimes it happens that they draft for need, right? And I think sometimes they have so many needs that you can't help but not draft for need. But in this case, it's just like, look, I truly believe they let the board come to them. And I think, yeah, you absolutely did do enough in this one. I loved it. And so Bill Patz has got a good question here. Appreciate you joining us, Bill. Did we demonstrate a sense of urgency with this draft? I think the answer to that question depends on your perspective. Now, from the GM's perspective, addressing 2026, probably so, right? You're like, hey, we're ahead of the game. We're addressing 2026 now. We're urgent. We're doing it, But from a player's perspective, from the actual football perspective, I would say yes, because you increased the competition in very important places. You sent a message to the receiver room that whatever they were last year is not good enough. So whatever that means to each individual one of them is what that means, and I think Goot's okay with that, right? I don't think that he needs, or I don't think he feels the need to, be detailed in his message of put up or shut up. So you increase the competition there in multiple spots, right? Matthew Golden is different than Savion Williams. They're both highly skilled. Rookie contracts, are obviously very attractive. So yeah, that just went up. So urgency increased there for sure. Offensive line, urgency increased on the offensive line, I think. Obviously Jordan Morgan enters the equation, which he was not part of last season, for most of it, at least. So he enters the equation, as well as these other draft picks that you've got. You've added a lot of bodies to this room right now. I think the floor has been raised. I think the competition is going to be more intense than it was last year. And so I think that increases, your urgency. And then, like I said, with the guys that they brought in on defense, I don't know that you needed to bring in, the premium picks in order to, demonstrate a sense of urgency, right? I don't think that you needed to bring in a first round defensive tackle to get a sense of urgency. First of all, they know the guys that they have better than anybody. I don't think you've got a single complacent dude in that D-line room, right? So I think any bodies you add to that room are going to increase the competition. So they've added bodies, right? They've added several familiar bodies with the Georgia dudes, a couple more Georgia guys coming into the mix. Sounds like one of the best chemistry guys out of Texas that you could ask for. All the guys out of Texas want to play with him. So yeah, I love it, man. I think that what they did definitely creates a sense of urgency. It speaks to the fact that complacency is not welcome here. You're going to have to compete every season, and it doesn't really matter where you play. So, all right. What else, man? I feel like we did a pretty good flyover here.
Yeah. I think we covered the draft pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Let's see here in the comments. You guys are going off. Our showers jumped in with us. Woohoo! Good to see R. I think we demonstrated a switch to power running. Heath and Savion will play together. You'll see. Ooh, okay.
They are definitely.
I
It's a
like that.
power. I mean, I think they showed that last year that they want to be more of a power running game, and I think between Banks and Belton, that show and really moving Elton Jenkins to center and letting Myers walk. That's demonstrating how they want to play. And he brings up Heath. He's going to have a tough time making
He's
the
gonna
team,
have a tough battle. I
right?
like the
Like,
idea of not writing him off, though. I like that.
no, absolutely not. You can't, and he's the kind of dude you don't write off. But the draft wasn't so good for Bo Melton or McCole Hardman. They're gonna, and Heath too. He's a little different receiver, but those guys are gonna have a tough time making the team now. But nothing should be given to Bo Melton or McCole Hardman anyway. So special teams, I think, will determine a lot of that as well. But Golden and Savion Williams can return kicks. So, yeah, going back to the urgency thing, and I don't want to repeat because I agreed with what you said, but the first thing that popped in my head about the urgency, did they do enough to increase the urgency, was the receiver room. Like, yeah, that's a wake-up call. If they didn't already have their wake-up call from their inconsistent season with all the drop passes and nobody being able to step up and kind of like grab hold of their position. Now the draft with a first round wide receiver and then following up with a third round receiver, you better be urgent in receiver room or you're going to be moving on. Like it's put up or shut up time there. So yeah, it's going back to R's original question. Yeah, they're definitely a power running team now. And I think they're finding guys that fit that mold much better than what they previously had.
I totally agree. I think the offensive line got a similar, maybe not as I don't know, sensational, drastic wake up call. Yeah, you didn't get that first receiver drafted in the first round since 2002 type vibes.
Right.
But yeah, you got some bodies brought in the room here, and again, I think the floor is up. I think the floor is raised from this time last year, where you're talking about you still had a few projects in there. You had a few guys that, people were, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? And I think that there are less projects. There's more competition and the talent level is increased, right? And you talk about size too, Belton's a big old boy, and some of that's going to matter, right? It doesn't all matter, but that may come down to it, and it may be a determining factor. So, yeah, I think that there was definitely a message sent, that complacency is not welcome here. And it was sent to the two groups on the offense that I think you could have made a case for another year of complacency, You've had these guys together for a couple years now. Let's give them another year to, get healthy, gel back together. No, man. You got to get in here and you've got to earn your spot again. And maybe you do, but you have to earn it. And some of you won't. Some of them won't. And I still think there will be some movement. We have some fun disagreement about Jaire Alexander, but I think that Romeo Doubs is just as much of a candidate to be moved as Alexander is. I don't know what went on with him last season that caused him to miss that game. Only the locker room knows that. But then you've also got the concussion issues. It just seems like he's made himself expendable. And there's probably some teams that would still value him.
I don't think they make that move yet. I think most likely he's there all season, but I think it's pretty clear he's not getting an extension. Now, it definitely could change. Maybe he has a breakout year and everything's great in the locker room and all that, and they change their mind. But it's really hard to see them giving him an extension. So,
yeah, I don't see it. So, yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff that still moves around, a lot of moving pieces. Trades can be made, I think, at any time. And so I will give my little 2 cents on what I think the front office is doing as far as Jaire goes. I think they're playing games with the media, and it's not unprecedented for them to do that. And it's not to say that they're totally 100% certain that they're keeping Jaire, but I think that they're just basically going, you never know. But they also don't want to close the doors. Like, yeah, you guys bring us the right offer, we'll trade him. Until then, there's really nothing else to talk about. And this idea that you would cut him, that people keep bringing up, I think it's silly. Like it's silly that you would cut a guy, especially when everyone has zero hesitation in talking about, well, I think cornerback is maybe still kind of thin. Well, it's not if you've got a healthy 28-year-old all-pro cornerback.
But he's not healthy. He hasn't
right
been
now,
healthy.
is he not?
It's the offseason. They're not playing football.
I know, but is he healthy?
But they're not playing football. When they do
will
play
be in 3 months. Is he going to play football then?
Probably not. No.
Do we know that? Has
We
any
don't.
see that? That's
Three out of the
one
last
beef
4
that I've got
years.
with the media. No. I'm not
Three
talking
out of the
about
last
what.
4
No,
years.
no.
He hasn't played. That's what you.
Is he
go off
healthy
of.
now or not? Is he healthy now or not? And
I
that's
guess so. But I don't care.
that's
if he's
one thing
healthy
I'm
now.
disappointed in the Packers media for not
No.
asking. They haven't asked that question. All they ask about is, well, what about Jaire? Is he going to be with the team? Is he healthy? Like, somebody tell me if he's healthy. And if he is healthy, well, now you make a case for cutting an all-pro corner that's healthy.
I'll make the case.
You're going to cut him.
He's not healthy. Yes.
If he's healthy, you're going to cut him.
The Packers are going to cut him. There's no question in my mind they are going to cut him unless they get any kind of a trade, which the report from Silverstein is that they had somebody that was willing to make a trade. Jaire doesn't want to redo his contract. So the trade's not apparently going to happen because I guess he thinks he's going to make the $17 million on the open market. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, whatever. At some point, yeah, they're going to cut him. Like, they started off-season workouts. The players are now in the building. Don't know if Jaire's there or not, but he technically can. They can't keep him away. He can show up, and he's got a big bonus for him to show up to however many workouts he's got to show up to. If he gets hurt in that building, they got to pay him all year. So they don't want to do that. So it's either they're going to cut him real soon with the off-season program starting, or they're going to come to some agreement to keep him away. And, hey, we're going to try to move on and find a trade partner. You stay away. And then the next deadline will be camp. But he's not going to be on this team next year. Like, it's not happening. They've had numerous opportunities to kill this thing, and they haven't. And they just continue to – he's on the team now. We'll see what happens. We're like, Good is out there before the draft saying, like, he's available, basically. Like, they're looking to move him. You don't do that for a guy. That's
the extent of it, which he's basically said about, not everybody, but we've seen like a guy like Rasul Douglas get traded in the middle of the season for a third-round pick. That's where I'm like,
he wasn't.
I think it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, he's a player. He's on our roster. And unless somebody comes along, he's going to be on the roster.
He's on the roster right now, is their answer. He's on the roster right now. If you ask them, is Rashawn Gary going to be on the team next year? I don't think they're saying he's on the roster right now. I think they're going to say, yeah, we have big plans for Rashawn Gary, or we have big plans for player whoever. They're not saying that about Jaire. Like, this isn't some media created thing. Like, he hasn't been healthy, and whatever other issues are going on inside the building, and it seems pretty clear there are, because there's been a lot of stuff that the coaches don't want him and are fed up with the stuff. Like,
I haven't heard that. I've heard them say that they like the player. They like him when he's on the field. I even heard say Goot said at the beginning of this offseason, there's no disconnect between the player and the team. Jaire was in Green Bay during the offseason. I don't see the obvious beef. I think I see a lot of people saying there's obvious problems, but then there's no list of obvious problems, except for the things that Jaire said to the media, who he does have beef with.
Well, that's fine.
I don't blame him.
I don't think they care about that. Their problem starts and revolves around his availability, and he hasn't been available.
Right, but
he's been off the field, and you can say he's healthy now.
Who knows the status of his health better than anybody else right now?
The Packers, and they know he hasn't been healthy, and they don't trust that he's going to be healthy. That's you can't say, well, he wasn't healthy 3 out of the last 4 years, but he's going to be healthy now. Like, all you can go off of is what you've seen, and I mean, bring back David Bakhtiari. He hasn't been healthy in 5 years. But who knows? He might be healthy next year. They know Jaire's not.
They knew the status of Bakhtiari, and
they know the
status
has played of Jaire.
that has played out. And the thing with Bakhtiari is they gave him every chance. I mean, even down to starting that first game against the Bears, and like probably shouldn't have done that. They gave him every chance to do that. And it does feel similar, except for the fans wanted Bakhtiari to try to play as much as he possibly could until it was clear that he couldn't. Whereas it feels very different with Jaire. He must have a bad attitude. He must just hate being in Green Bay. There must be just all sorts of problems that we actually can't identify.
So he practiced in full for several weeks and then didn't play. There's something there, and LaFleur wouldn't answer it, wouldn't go there. So why is he practicing in full?
You know why? Hold on. I have an answer.
Wait a second. Let me finish.
I have an answer for this.
Let me finish. So maybe there is. I'm not saying there is, but it kind of smells fishy to me. But he's not available. He's not healthy. Like, you can't. So if he shows up this year and he's not healthy again, you're going to continue to bring him back until eventually some year, maybe he will be healthy.
No, listen.
Ever since he wrecked his shoulder in 2021.
My whole argument is if he's healthy, and the Packers know that better than anybody else. If he's healthy,
and they know that he's not. They don't have the faith that he's going to be. He could be healthy now in April. Everybody, well, not everybody, but most players are healthy now. But that doesn't mean that you can trust that he's going to be healthy in September or in November and December, where he hasn't been healthy. Ever since he hurt his shoulder in 2021, it's been downhill with his health, and it's been one thing after another. And I'll throw this out there, and I don't even want to get into this debate. When he does play, he's not this shut down Darrelle Revis, take away one side of the field corner. He's good, but he's not like irreplaceable.
That's fair. We don't have to get into that debate.
Okay.
I will concede that he's not at his peak right now. No. I will not assume that his best football is not in front of him, because a lot of people made that same assumption about Charles Woodson, and then he went off and won Defensive Player of the Year. He's 28 years old. The guy can get healthy. He can still rebound and have a lot of great football in front of him. I think that the issues have been overstated by the media, because I think the media doesn't like him. But you said, why was he practicing and then not playing? And why wouldn't the coaches and anybody address it? You do not criticize your training staff. This was a training staff issue. If it was a player issue, a guy just doesn't want to play, he would have gone on IR. A player that doesn't want to play doesn't practice all week and then sit. That's not that behavior doesn't check out, man. Like, doesn't add up. There's no sensible reason to do that. Like, the whole reason you practice is to play. Like, practicing sucks. Like, practicing's not fun. Playing is fun. So to do the thing that's not fun and then be like, no, I'm not going to play, like that doesn't make any sense at all, man. It's like there's no. Go ahead.
No. You brought up Charles Woodson. Charles Woodson was 6'1", 210 pounds. Jaire's 180 pounds. He physically
was at 195.
190.
Take 15 pounds away from him.
I don't know if
that's
he's
an important difference.
I don't know if he's 195, but
he's
whatever.
Listed at 195.
Okay.
He's not Maxwell Hairston. It's 183, and then it's like a
lot of guys
190.
are listed at different weights. But regardless, he doesn't play physically. He's a terrible tackler. He goes in there throwing his arms. My point being, they know his body, and they don't trust that it's going to hold up based on all the injuries he's already accumulated and based on the way he plays and the size of his body. They're betting that he's not going to stay healthy because he hasn't stayed healthy, and because they know what he is as a football player, and they know what he is physically better than any other team in the NFL. Okay, that's what they're going off of.
Fair. Your perspective is fair. I'm just not convinced it's accurate. That's where I'm at. I'm not convinced it's none of us know for sure, right? Like, I'm not sitting here from some sort of, I know better than you, Tim. I just think, like, my perspective is that this has been a misread situation. And I think at a position as important as corner, where you do need depth, unless the guy is a financial liability, which he's not, they've already said, we can afford him. We don't need to do anything. And him not being willing to restructure, you still have 2025. Now, does that mean he comes back after 2025? No, that's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is they don't need to do anything in order to have him play in 2025. Financially, it's not a problem.
They don't need to financially, but they want to. Even
Sure,
if they
but
wanted him back, they would
for
be
what?
asking him for a pay cut, even if they wanted him back.
And
Because
maybe
not
that's where the
so
issue is.
they can afford to, but they don't want to because he's not worth that contract.
I
He's
get
not.
that, but we don't always get what we want. And you did sign a deal, and the player's living up to his side of it as much as he can within injuries. So my point being is, and this kind of comes down to a similar situation like with Rodgers in 2021. It's what what ultimately forces a decision, right? Like in 2021, Adam Schefter, right? Like comes out, oh, Rodgers is never going to play in Green Bay again. Like, oh, okay, well, what a statement to make. Like, let's actually factually get down to that. I don't think anybody, including and maybe Jaire and the Packers are the only two who could say this. They clearly haven't. Nobody in the media, fans, whatever, can sit here and say, oh, this guy's days are done. It's just you don't have the information to say that. A lot of assumptions, right? Well, 3 out of the last 4 years he's been injured. I get that. I feel like if they actually believed as strongly as that you were saying that they do, that they're done with this guy because of his injuries, that they're projecting forward saying he's going to continue to get hurt, we're done with him. I think they already would have taken what they could have gotten. I don't think that you're telling me that there is just nothing out there for Jaire Alexander. And I think that you at that point, you take what you can get, even if it's a 7th round pick. You don't cut the guy. You need bodies at the position.
I think one, they would probably take what they could get if they had a legit offer, which apparently they don't have. I don't think they're sitting there saying, we got to have a 2nd round pick. I think if they could get a 5th or a 6th round pick, they would take it and move on. I think they probably are at that point where if they can get anything for him, they would move on. But teams want him to restructure his deal, and he won't do it, which tells you that other teams know his productivity and his lack of availability does not match his performance, does not match his contract. So they're ready to move on. This is like a player's gotten to a point, and his is because of injury, and maybe there's more stuff. We can put that to the side, but it's absolutely about injury where his play does not meet his contract. So you move on. They moved on from Devondre Campbell because his play did not meet his contract. Same situation. And you can say, I get what you're saying about the cornerback room, and they need more bodies there.
That situation read way different than this one does. He was working out with Xavier McKinney, man. Like the team seems to be.
It doesn't matter.
Even Jordan Love. I know it doesn't matter, but it can give you a read on the situation. I know the players are not signing the. I get that, and a lot of people wanted Jordy Nelson coming. I get that. There's all sorts of examples where beloved players were moved on from when it wasn't necessarily popular. My point, though, is again, you're bringing up Devondre Campbell. I think it's fair to compare it, but I do think the situations read very differently.
Yes, but pick any player that they've cut. They've determined that player and their contract does not match their performance, and they're going to move on. It's the same thing. And why they want to move on is because of his injuries. So it doesn't match what his contract is and what they're paying him. So it's time to move on. They're going to move on from him. I agree they need guys in the cornerback room. I think that's one of the things that they've yet to address. I like the Hobbs pickup, but beyond that, they need more bodies there, sure. But they're not going to be like, well, we got to keep Jaire because we need more bodies there. That's not the way they work. If they determine they got to move on from a guy, they're going to move on from him, and they'll figure it out. But they've determined that's it. He's not going to be here one way or another. And if they can get something for him, anything in a trade, they'll do that. And if they can't, they will cut him.
So I only agree with the part where if they can get what they want in a trade, they'll do it. I don't think they'll cut him. I don't think it makes sense to cut him if you can't get what you want. And I get it. Oh, he's not worth his contract. Fine. But you made a bad deal. That doesn't mean you can just back out of it. And I think the player might know that at this point. It seems like Jaire is kind of navigating this situation intentionally, being part of offseason workouts and doing the things that he's doing. I don't think that it's been determined that they're going to get rid of him. I think the door is open, and I think they understand that these things are fluid. Eventually somebody maybe gets hurt, and a team now again, we talked about how a team might value Jaire differently as circumstances change. I think they're leaving that door open, but they're saying, well, if we go into 2025, players healthy, let's just roll with it, and then we'll move on from him after 2025. Is that ideal? No, but can they do it? Yeah. And you're saying they want to move on from him. I hear you, but it's not like, well, they can't re-sign Jordan Love until they move on from Jaire or something like that. There's not this thing that's hinging out. Well, they can't sign their draft class, or man, they really need
another. I'm not saying that at all.
No. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what I'm saying is there's no impetus. There's nothing that's forcing that decision, which is where I think a non-decision actually gets him back in Green Bay this season, because it's the move of least resistance, right? Like, you need impetus for something else to happen.
I think they've just determined that they're ready to move on because of the injuries, and they don't want to pay him that contract. He's no longer worth it. I don't think it was a bad deal. I think he got hurt repeatedly.
I think it was a fine deal, actually. And even now, as corners are getting paid more probably than they should, I think the deal even looks better, which is why it's like, it's not a big deal to swallow it. It's like, yeah, you don't want to pay the guy that's been hurt and maybe he gets hurt again. You don't want to do that, but there's not a thing that says like, dude, if you do that, you can't do this other thing. You know what I mean? That's my point. And I know that we could sit here, Tim, go all night and disagree on this. Well, and I like this debate. I feel like we have fair points on both sides. I think what it comes down to is just different perspectives. And ultimately we got to see how it plays out for sure. But I think if you're on my side of the debate and you think Jaire's coming back, the cornerback room looks different than if you're on Tim's side of the debate and you think Jaire's gone. The whole thing is, what the heck do you do about it? So I think that let's shift to your side of the debate and assume, man, we got to get rid of Jaire. If that's what the front office feels, you have enough assets to package him with something else to make a move. You do. So I think that eventually they figure that out. The idea of cutting him, I think if they could do that, they would have done it. I don't think other teams want to take on the contract either. Yeah, but I think if they knew they didn't have any options, they would have already cut him.
I think they want to get something for him. And Goody said that. He wants to get something for him.
You should. He's
and they've exhausted it. We're now through the draft. It didn't happen.
You already signed somebody else. You can't cut the guy that you're not going to move on with. That's where I think, if they knew they didn't have,
we're not getting anything.
If they knew they didn't have the ability to get something, they would have already made the move. I think that they're holding out. I'm not totally disagreeing with you that they want to move on, and I understand. Yeah, maybe he's not worth the contract in their eyes. But it's just not, there's not a big thing that says, well, if you overpay a guy 1 year that you didn't want to, oh, damn. Well, there's others where it's like, well, to get under the cap, this guy's got to go, and so that's just not the situation. But anyway, we've gone super late, man. And I enjoyed this debate, but Al's going to get on here and be like, what are you guys doing?
We're in trouble.
And it's tomorrow for you already. So if you guys been hanging with us, I see you guys over there in the comments. You're still in here with us, our showers, Jutta time. Appreciate you guys. And the rest of you guys have been in the comments with us tonight. Y'all rock. We appreciate y'all. This is a lot of fun hanging out with y'all on the Monday nights, mostly. Sometimes we got to push it Tuesdays, but no, thank you guys. This was a fun little debate here. We might have to clip it out and separate the Jaire debate or something. But we'll see what happens. Ultimately time will tell. And either way, Tim and I will always agree on go Pack go, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I certainly have faith that whatever the path may be, Goot knows how to build the 60th Super Bowl champion. So that's what we're ultimately trying to get to. So anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. If y'all would, you had fun with us on this episode, spike that like button, get on over to the YouTube channel, Packers Talk Network. Hit that subscribe button. Follow us along. We'll be here every Monday night at 9:30 Central Time with y'all streaming live, talking Pack, no other nonsense or anything else like that. We'll see y'all next week. And, of course, go Pack